That's a conversation that is getting the concern of everyone around the world, and you should be interested, because if there's a wider conflict, it's going to be very disturbing. Mr. Femi Otubanjo, research professor of international relations and strategic studies at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, Lagos, joins us. Welcome to the program, sir.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Just like everyone else, I'm sure you're very concerned on this development now that Iran is in the fray of all of this. Now, it's more disturbing, perhaps bigger than, would I say bigger is the word now, more concerning than what's happening between Russia and Ukraine, because this can take a religious dimension, which can make things a bit convoluted. So how would you explain what is going on between Iran and Israel?
What Iran was always part of the war in Gaza. So it is not new that what we have seen is just a mere a little bit of escalation of an ongoing Iranian engagement. Iran has around Israel more than 10 affiliates. Hezbollah, you have the Houthis who have been attacking ships. You have Islamic Jihad. You have the ones that was attacked in Syria, Islamic Revolutionary Guard. So essentially, Iran has fought on a proxy war through its affiliates, and Israel tried to respond to that by attacking the consulate in Damascus. It is that attack which killed a general and several other commanders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard of Iran that has brought about this response. But as Iran has said strenuously, it is a one-off response. It is a reaction to that Damascus attack. Because it has to say first, Iran had encouraged its affiliates to be attacking Israel, and Israel has been attacked on all sides by all these affiliates in Syria, in Lebanon, and in the Yemen, and even in Iraq. And so there was no way that having been attacked and his generals killed, that he would just keep quiet. So it's some kind of measured, guided retaliatory attack is what we have seen. Whether it will lead to escalation depends really on Israel's reaction. It is if Israel begins to adopt a strategy of tit for tat that we might begin to see escalation. But from what we have heard so far, there's pressure on Israel not to take any measures. The pivotal country in this matter is the United States of America. The U.S. has the responsibility to put pressure on Israel not to respond. Because if Israel responds, obviously we expect that Iran will also respond. And then we cannot predict. The Yoruba say in the beginning of a fight that no, you cannot predict the end of it. So if the United States already imploring Israel to calm down and not to take any precipitate action, it has also specifically said that it will not take part, the U.S. military will not take part in any retaliatory action against Iran. That should caution Israel that it is not advisable that it should continue on this line. Israel has, of course, threatened that it will respond at an appropriate time and at the place of its choosing. But it must recognize that every response will lead to a counter-response, and there will be no end to escalation.
Goodness me, and the way you paint it is just really dire. But watching both ambassadors, ambassador of Israel to UN and Iran's ambassador to UN speak yesterday at the UN UNSC, you know, there's just that ominous feeling as to what will happen next. But you could hear from their tone that they were probably preparing for the worst, and the worst is not what we want to see now in the world, especially how it might spiral across board. But for the benefit of a younger generation who might not understand where this is coming from, you said it will become a case of tit for tat. And I'm trying to think, who was responsible for the first tit who was the first aggressor, and then we saw a tat that is now going back and forth. For some other young people, they see this as just a group of old people with big egos and big toys, you know, just pushing a button and, you know, killing people. How would you break it down to them? Who was responsible for the first hit? They were seeing this tat and the back and forth.
Well, the reality is that well, it's a chicken and egg situation. Which comes from the chicken or the egg. Iran had consistently been hostile to Israel. There's no doubt about that. And as I did say in my opening remarks, Iran has several affiliates that are fighting their proxies. Iran is the one that is arming them, providing them with weapons. Iran is the main backer of Hamas, of Hezbollah, of the Houthis, of Islamic Renaissance, and all those groups that are fighting Israel. And so, if you are looking for the foundation of the tit for tat, maybe you can, the remote foundation is that proxy war that Iran has been fighting against Israel. But the immediate cause of this current escalation is the attack by Israel on Iranian consulate in Damascus, which led to the killing of top officers of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard. So I don't know which one now is the beginning, which one is the cause and so on. But the reality is that Iran has been arming people against Israel. It has always taken a hostile, does not recognize the state of Israel, calls for the destruction of Israel, and so on. And Israel has always seen Iran as a major enemy. And of course, since the Carter period, the Americans on their side have seen Iran as a major enemy of the United States. And therefore, in working with Israel, America is working working against a common enemy. The reality here, of course, is that Israel is currently fighting a war in Gaza. And that war has not been concluded. That you cannot predict. The other time, Netanyahu talks, braggart and talks big, says it will end in a few weeks. When they got into the grand war in Gaza, they did not expect it to last for 6 weeks. But it lasted for more than 6 months. When Russia went to Ukraine, Russia, a nuclear superpower, went to Ukraine, it's been there for over 1 year. It's never been able to conclude it. And so if Israel does not caution itself and gets into a war with Iran, it will be opening a war on another front. Israel went to a war in Lebanon at one point and had to run away back, fighting Hezbollah. War is not something you can predict because everybody has access to modern weapons. And therefore, Israel does not really have the size of the military that can conduct expanded military operations for more than a few months. So it is in the interest of Israel more than anything else to try to caution itself and not depend on its so-called technological superiority to think that they can dump bombs on every country. But at the end of the day, you have to send ground troops. Where are the troops that you will send? So it is, and then of course, if the United States comes in, and although it's claiming that it will not participate, but when it comes to a direct war between Israel and Iran, the United States can be expected to participate. The Western powers will bring in their weapons, whether they bring in their troops is another matter. And we never know who is going to support Iran. Will Russia support Iran? Will China support Iran? So these are the dangers that we face in this kind of escalation. It's like the Nigerian government has advised, let everybody calm down and let diplomacy take effect. This is the time for diplomacy, not lobbing rockets and missiles and drones and so on. Because really, nobody will win the war. Everybody will be losers.
Indeed, Prof. And, even the United Nations has expressed worry that the Middle East appears to be on the brink with the Iran's attack on Israel. But the curious thing, which seems to be emerging now, is reports suggesting that Jordan may have opened up its airspace to Israeli and U.S. planes during that drone attack by Iran on Israel. And Israel may have also received help from Saudi Arabia playing a critical role since they host, according to reports by DW, Western air defense systems and surveillance. So it would seem as if Israel may not be isolated as is generally perceived in the Middle East. So what do you predict could happen, following this attack by Iran? Would Israel be more isolated, or would it actually receive support from countries that are perceived to be either neutral or on the other side of support of the Arab countries?
Well, the fact that, as we are beginning to see, is that Israel received a great deal of support from the U.S. in shooting down several of the drones and missiles. It might have received, I cannot confirm that, might have received help from Saudi Arabia and other countries. But that is the nature of escalation. If you do not control the exchange of fire, you are going to find other people coming in, and you don't know how many will come in, how they will come in, and the proportion of their intervention. So the important thing is to sit back and look at the possibilities. There are people who have argued, even within Israel, that the Israel attack on Damascus was a misjudgment. It had no strategic value. All that he did was to try to tell Iran that I can get your associates, I can get your people. The practice in the past between the two countries is to fight through proxies. Israel will attack Hezbollah, Iran will supply Hezbollah, not attack each other directly. Israel breached that by going to attack the consulate of Iran, which is an attack on Iranian territory. That's, by the way, it's interesting, the point that was raised before about the Israelis and the UN. I saw the venom in the address by the Israeli ambassador, and I was wondering, is it not the same Israel that has shunned the UN, that has disobeyed the tons of UN resolutions, now calling on the UN to do something? I mean, you create an institution and you do not respect it. And in time of distress, you are now asking it to come and do something. The UN has been emasculated by all these powers. They do what they like. They disobey international law. They do not respect UN charter and do what they like. But when they are on the receiving end, they now shouting that the UN should come to their aid. They see the UN as their own instruments of diplomacy, of advancing their own interests, not managing global peace. So we need the UN Security Council to be firm and tell people to stay calm. But we must not depend on it, because these countries do what they like. When they are fighting themselves, like Russia is breaching the sovereignty of Ukraine for whatever reasons it may, it's a breach of sovereignty. Whether you can say it's in national interest, whatever justification. But is Russia listening to the United Nations? Is it listening to the Security Council? So that is the problem we have. Whether we will allow the Security Council to play its role and manage peace, because that is its primary assignment, manage peace in that region. But of course, what we expect and what we hope is that common sense will prevail in the United States. The United States has a major role to play in trying to calm down and pulling the strings that it has on Israel. And of course, this is an election year in the U.S. We must recognize that the Jewish situation is a major element in U.S. elections. We have to be careful. Biden would not go all the way to antagonize Israel, to withdraw support from Israel in a way that will make Israel vulnerable in the Middle East, because that will also affect his popularity in this election year.
Well, there appears to be enough hypocrisy and blame game to go around when it comes to the West. And when you look at the proxy wars that have been fought on all fronts, there's some U.S., Russia, Kiev being the ground zero, and then we're not having this fear of escalation, these perpetual enemies, Israel and Iran. And then we have China somewhere around the fringes and all of that. But the African sub-region, I don't know what's our stake in this and how we can approach this. So in proposing how Africa can approach this situation to maybe speak, we may not have a very big seat on the table, but from the little corner we sit, If anything happens, it will affect all of us. How can Africa approach this in terms of our leaders to make sure that this doesn't go beyond what it is?
Well, it's just to raise our voice. We have, international politics is about power. If you don't have power, you can't influence anything. But we can raise our voice, and we are doing so. Nigeria has already indicated its preference for diplomatic resolution of this dispute. So Africa can continue to raise its voice and put pressure, diplomatic pressure, on the big powers, particularly. But really, we have very little leverage. With the Middle East, we do not have a unit like the oil, the crude oil that can be used to pressurize the West. We have oil producers, but they do not amount to nothing in the calculus of international power. So our sub-region will continue to be just like the audience, watching what is going on and occasionally applauding or booing. But I think that a voice can count for something if you can work on the big powers, and also let Israel know that it can never win this war militarily. It has to depend on diplomacy to get what it wants.
Well, I know there's been that narrative online about self-acclaimed Prime Minister of Biafra Republic pledging to support Israel with 15,000 troops. A lot of people were not sure whether it was satire or otherwise, but I just wanted to stretch that a bit and show that, hey, it looks like governments, proper governments, are not even thinking about getting into this in the first place. All of that narrative is just out there, perhaps for satire and the rest. But on a final note, there's a fear of World War III. Do you see that happening in our lifetime? Because that's been trending.
Yeah, well, you see, there are all level of interest. Basically in international relations, you have core interests, you have secondary, you have peripheral. What you call millennia. What is happening is what you call millennia. These are interests that do not particularly affect those big powers that can generate war. I think that if we are going to have a war in the international system, that there must be some significant differences, conflict between the US and Russia, these big nuclear powers. I don't think that Russia will consider any great interest in this conflict, so want to fight a war. So while war is always next door to us, but it's not likely. The probability for now is still very remote. I believe that common sense will prevail. The United States will not consider what is happening in Israel sufficiently threatening to its interest as to want to go into war. And if the United States supports Iran, I'm not sure that will automatically activate Russian support. Russia will provide proxy support, but it will not send troops. So I'm not so sure that the United States will be anxious to send troops before. Also, don't forget that the US, I must say this, has not been successful since the Second World War in fighting wars, except in Iraq, where it managed to impose some peace there. But in Afghanistan, in Korea, in Vietnam, the United States had to run away. And I don't think that the people want to start another war whose ending will not be able to predict.
Prof, it's good to hear that we don't have a third world war in our hands, or it will be in our lifetime. It's quite soothing to hear that. Professor Femi Otubanjo, Research Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs here in Lagos. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program.
Thank you very much for having me. Have a good day.
You too. Well, guys, when he talked about it's not possible, I just said amen in my heart. Let it not happen, because I've seen communal war and it wasn't funny. Some people have not seen any, you've just seen riots and all of that. I've seen communal war. I've been there at the epicenter of it, and it is not funny. Not to talk about a full escalation. You don't want to be there. I want to thank you for your time and company. I'm Jeffrey Uzama.
Thank you so much for watching. Let's remember to try and make love, not war. Join us again tomorrow and throughout the week when we bring you another edition of the program. I am Bukola Koka.
And not to forget that Sunrise Daily comes up any moment from now. So join us. We have a bumper package for you. Let common sense always be the watchword for all of us, government and the people. I'm Kayode Kikilu. Have a great day.